Hello, everybody, and welcome. Before we get started here tonight, I'm just going to take a few moments to talk about the tools we're using here tonight and some tips. The first is that live transcript is available for this meeting, and you can turn it on by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and adjusting the subtitles there. You have been muted so that we can hear from all of our speakers tonight. Because there are so many of us joining on the call, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to use the chat box to let us know your thoughts and your questions. This meeting is open to all members of the public, and it is being held about holding a referendum in conjunction with the municipal election in 2022. Please keep all of your communications on topic and respectful. For the safety of the speakers and the attendees, if your communication is not respectful, you will be removed from this meeting. The meeting is being recorded, so we will be able to share this recording with you early next week. And for folks joining on the phone, if you have any questions, you can email them to wedeserveareferendum@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to pass them along to the speakers. That goes for folks who are looking for tech support in this meeting. You can either direct message me, you can find my name Megan and send me a message on Zoom, or you can email wedeserveareferendum@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks for joining us, and you can get started in the chat by letting us know where you're joining from and what you're hoping to hear here. With that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Anya.
I'm so glad that we are able to gather tonight. It's wonderful to bring everyone together to do this important work. But before we start, I would like to make some acknowledgements. We are meeting on land that has been occupied by humans since the glaciers retreated over 10,000 years ago. I want to acknowledge those first people. We are meeting on the land that has been home to various nations over these thousands of years. I want to acknowledge the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Chunanto nations. These are the First Nations of this land. We are meeting on land covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, which states that anyone that takes up residence in the Great Lakes Basin, as we have, owes it to everyone else to share the resources and not deplete them. We are meeting on the land covered by Treaty Number 45.5, the Saugeen Treaty signed in 1836. I acknowledge that our presence here is governed by this treaty and call upon our government to honor it. We are, if we are non-Indigenous, immigrants and settlers, as I am an immigrant. The true history of this land hasn't been taught in our schools, and we have much to learn about the true relations between the Indigenous people and Canadians. I acknowledge that I am on this learning journey and invite you to learn with me. The Indigenous people cared for this land and practiced sustainable living so as to not destroy the environment. We have much to learn from their teachings, and I wish to acknowledge what a deep privilege it is for us to gather here. As part of our reconciliation work, I wish for stronger ties to the Indigenous nations we live alongside today.
Thank you, Anya, for that land announcement. Good evening and welcome. Thanks to all of you that have taken the time out of your busy schedule to be with us tonight. The directors and the advisory team really appreciate your support. This evening's discussion will be all about the campaign that we started back in October called We Deserve a Referendum, coincident with the October 22nd municipal election. So please keep your questions and comments on that subject, and always remember to be respectful of the people with your comments. It's easy to get sidetracked on the bigger issue of the DGR proposal, but that's not what we're here tonight about. We all grew up in a country and a community where we work together to make a difference and to improve the quality of life for ourselves and our children. It's our right to have a say in how we want to live and what we expect our community to be. That is the purpose and the focus of our campaign, We Deserve a Referendum. Tonight, we will be asking for your support on this initiative, and with your help, we can and will win this battle. We want this to be an interactive session and we look forward to your suggestions and questions. We will start with some opening remarks from Michelle Stein, our fearless leader. And by the way, you can put your thumbs up if you agree with that comment. And she will give us a quick overview of her latest thoughts. After Michelle's comments, we will play a video, which is mainly focused on the question and answer period from the council meeting of January 11th. There will be a polling questions or two throughout the evening, and we welcome your input on insights on these questions.
Good evening, fellow residents and ratepayers of South Bruce. On behalf of all of us at Protect Our Waterways and the over 1,280 people who have now signed the petition, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I promise not to make this very long. Diane and I had an interesting night at the council meeting on January 11th. The one thing that kept us smiling was knowing that all the petitioners were supporting us, as well as the great group of people parked outside the municipal office honking and cheering us on. Hearing those horns really raised our spirits and made it worthwhile. All of you made us feel very welcome. Mayor Buckle and his fellow council members, not so much. In a few moments, we're going to show you a video of the latter half of our delegation to council. You'll see how we attempted to present our petition to hold a referendum on our community's willingness to host the DGR, and to do so during the 2022 municipal election. You will see the admonishments and finger waving we got in return. I'm sorry to say that our entire presentation fell on deaf ears. It appears that the Municipal Council of South Bruce is not willing to listen unless the message has been approved by the NWMO and it promotes the council's desired outcome. You'll see for yourself. Not only did council refuse to vote on our motion, one, to rescind their motion of December 14th, which was to not make a decision on how to determine willingness, but to suggest that a future council could maybe hold a referendum later, after the NWMO and municipality had completed all of their studies, and to direct the CEO to compare a clear yes or no ballot option on the community willingness for October 22. Not only did the council refuse to vote, they even refused to pass our motion on to staff for further study and recommendation. Council would not even agree to review our request that they view the validity of the petition in a closed session so that we could protect the confidentiality of those who signed it. I'm actually surprised that they agreed to see us at all, but we learned it was not our message they wanted to hear. They had a message for us. Council told us repeatedly that 1,258 people represented only a quarter of the population, and that the municipality is completely committed to the process with the NWMO. It was, and still is, the opinion of our municipal council that no changes to the process need to be made, let alone considered, and bad on us for even talking about it. In short, like children, we were treated as best seen and not heard, except they'd rather not see us either. Watching this week's council meeting, it was very surprising to hear the mayor implore the public to please become engaged in this process. Yet when we represented over 1,280 residents who were engaged in the process, they didn't want to hear us because we weren't promoting the NWMO agenda. The question now is, what do we do? That's why we've called you here today. Do we stop and let the process continue according to the municipality's NWMO-led timeline? Or do we keep growing our petition in the hope that if 1,258 petitioners don't convince them, 1,500 or 2,000 or maybe 2,500 signatures will change their minds? Let's remember, in 2018, there were about 4,600 residents eligible to vote. So if we get at least half of that, or 2,500 or more, that'll actually be more than 50% of South Bruce voting population, and more people than actually came out to vote in the 2018 municipal election. All of us at Protect Our Waterways were disappointed, but we weren't surprised at our elected officials' treatment. They acted like a petition representing over 25% of the voters was something they could disregard as easily as a strongly worded letter to the mayor. But it's our belief that if we want true community decision-making about the NWMO and its DGR, we must continue to fight. If we don't, I'm sure the council will find a way to avoid a referendum. It's sad to say that if we want council to represent the will of the people of South Bruce, we must do everything we can to force them. We need all of you to telephone and email the mayor and the CAO. We need you to tell them how disappointed you are that your petition to council was disregarded. We need you to tell them that it's time for them to start listening to the voters of the community. Imagine if 25% of the population of Listowel presented a petition to their council. That would be about 2,000 people. If 25% of the population of Owen Sound presented a petition to their council, that would be about 5,000 people. And if 25% of the population of London presented a petition to their council, that would be over 100,000 people. Do you think these other councils, those other elected officials in neighboring municipalities would reject a petition from 25% of their voters? I certainly hope not, or democracy as we know it is in a very sorry state. In South Bruce, democracy is in a sorry state. Why? Because the NWMO is paying the municipality to help it manufacture the willingness of our community. Just this week, the NWMO announced the hiring of 2 more people, a South Bruce partnership manager and someone with the title of relationship manager, as well as 2 people called engagement associates. That's not including the people that the NWMO has hired with NWMO money to sell us that the deep geological repository will be safe. And it is going to be the best thing to happen in South Bruce since the downpour after a summer-long dry spell. All these people, they haven't been hired to inform us. They've been hired to manage us. CBC had an article this week on what happens when an NWMO employee seems to be too much on the community side. Their job is to keep us quiet and convince us to believe that everything is going to be just fine. You wait, they tell us. You'll see, it's going to be great. I'm not going to kid you. We are up against a very tough opponent. To call them well-funded would be like calling Lake Huron a little patch of water. But we're going to play the video now, and you can decide for yourself how our petition was treated. While you're watching, share your comments, questions, and be thinking of ideas on what the next steps could be. Then we'll wrap up and ask you to help us get more petitions signed, to call and write the people who run our municipality. That's what they need to be informed. We're ready to vote. And now we'll watch the video.
Time and time again, the NWMO has told us they are committed to a community-driven process. Next slide, please. So let's give it to them. Let the community lead the process instead of allowing the NWMO and the nuclear industry to dictate how this community conducts its business. Next slide, please. Please rescind your motion of December 14th, 2021. Next slide, please. And vote to pass this motion. Thank you. We're pleased to answer any of your questions.
Okay, just one thing I want verified. You said that you have 1,258 independently verified residents and ratepayers of South Bruce. So there will be no signatures when you do present it, probably at the next council meeting. There'll be no signatures from anybody unless they live here or they pay taxes here. That is correct. You have stated that, okay? Well, I just want to make sure that that is definitely verified. Okay? And,
Mayor Buckle, it was verified to the best of the scrutineer's abilities. They don't have a complete list as the municipality would have. So it was to the best of their ability.
so why would they not go to the municipality and get that list then, if this is so important?
We can do that. Sure.
Okay, very well, very well. And as you know, when we're on the subject of 1,258, which is fine, that's great. But you do realize that the population here is over 5,500 people. And council, we all represent everybody, just not you. Okay, you must realize that. Okay, so they have their opinions also.
Yes, that's very interesting, Mayor. On December 14th, Council was presented with a letter with 500 type names asking you to move forward with the NWMO's process. And that evening, you all voted to move forward with developing a memorandum of understanding and a draft host agreement with the NWMO. Tonight, we've presented a verified petition, which includes names, addresses, and signatures from 1,258 residents, yet you say it doesn't represent people in the community. How are 500 typed names more relevant than 1,258 signatures?
Well, that was actually based on a staff report of what our population is, but you must admit those other people or the Willing to Listen group did not go door to door, knocking on doors, wanting people to sign a petition in support of it. It was just, so I do want to point that out to the general public, okay? So, Councilor.
Mayor Bucko, I can show you something that was sent in. It came in with our card. It says, for privacy reasons, we thought it was worth a stamp rather than the card come through the mail. So there are people that are very concerned about confidentiality, which is something that we came across. And a lot of our petition cards came in through the mail. They weren't collected, they came in through the mail. Everyone got a card dropped off and they have the option to send it in or not.
Very well, very well. But you must realize that council represents everybody, like in the whole municipality, and they have to do what they really kind of think was best.
Right. And we're really hoping that that is a large percentage that you're looking at, because it was not for or against a DGR, sir. It was for or against a vote. So there are people in here that are for a DGR as well as against a DGR. But this petition was simply for the chance to vote at the next municipal election.
Yeah, very well. Okay, other councillors, comments, please. Go ahead, Councillor Getz.
Michelle, your comment that 1,258 people weren't represented by council and never had a choice or a say in this project. Are you telling me that those 1,258 people never had the opportunity to participate in the GHD study or GDH study?
What we're saying is you and many other councilor members and the clerk knew that there was a petition to collect signatures asking for a referendum as part of the 2022 municipal election. And on December 14th, you chose to make a decision that basically says no to a referendum as part of a municipal election when you knew we were coming forward to present this information. So you decided not to listen to the 1,258 people who signed this petition. But we're offering the petition tonight, and we're hoping that things can be changed.
But if I recall correctly, Michelle, the majority of the people that were involved in that study said they wanted a referendum, but not now. They wanted more information. So
I believe the GHD lady said that they didn't ask when people wanted the referendum. If I remember correctly from her presentation, the selection was a referendum. They didn't divide it into when people wanted a referendum. That was not something that they took note of.
They did say they wanted more information before they make their decision.
She said in the list of people who wanted a referendum, they did not divide it into who wanted it now and who wanted it later. So I believe she mentioned that she didn't know what percentage was wanting a referendum now or wanting a referendum later. And most of the community is ready to vote yes or no. And we need to end this division in our community as soon as possible. And that's in your hands. Our community needs to come to decision on this so we can get on with our lives.
If you're so concerned about residents being uninformed, then we suggest you hurry up and get the studies done. It only involves hiring more consultants and putting them to work, and the NWMO can pay for it.
Okay, another comment there, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess on that comment that you just made, you're suggesting we should rush science and we'll get a better result?
The answer is simple. They can hire more consultants and put them to work. I was recently reading the summary of the multi-year funding report, and it was interesting to note that under the technical studies and assessments, there was a comment there that consultants were engaged to do several studies, but they were delayed pending input information from the NWMO. The NWMO can be told to stop delaying studies, and for the financial impact study, it's time for them to commit to and clearly state the financial benefits that they would offer in a hosting agreement. The science is not going to be rushed.
Anybody else got a comment here? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor McDonough. I'll take him first. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Michelle, you state that the studies can all be completed by the end of 2022, or the majority of them, which I agree with. But to have them peer reviewed, to have them confirmed and make sure everything is in order would really seriously need to be done probably by March, so that we could form the question to have put on the ballot. Now that, I believe, is rushing things. So I don't see any way that your timeline can work.
Again, it involves hiring more consultants and putting them to work.
But
the NWMO can pay for it.
That's my comment.
Okay. Oh, and just to further your comment there, Mike, haste makes waste. So anyway, Councillor Neeson, you had your hand up.
Well, my comment was just along the lines of Deputy Mayor McDonough's. This timeline has been laid out for almost a year now when we started the borehole drilling. And it was presented, I think, around, I might need some correction on this, around the end of August, that the results for the borehole drilling weren't going to be done until the end of February, the beginning of March. And we've made no secret that we weren't going to decide on a referendum or any type of decision until after that was done. So this timeline has been public knowledge since August. So I don't know why you waited till now to bring this.
We have been asking since the beginning for a referendum, a binding referendum. This isn't a new request, and we've been told time and time again to wait and wait and wait. And let's be honest, the studies that the NWMO are doing are going to come back telling us the DGR is safe. The NWMO keeps telling us it's going to be, and the final environmental assessment studies aren't even going to be completed before a host agreement is done. And in fact, the NWMO has just promoted Derek Wilson to the organization to help the organization get ready to build the mine and pass the regulatory hurdles. The NWMO isn't expecting any issues. It's time to let the community have a voice so people can make decisions and move on with their lives.
So you're us to alter our agenda that we've laid out basically a year in advance.
We're asking you to stop following the NWMO's agenda and start listening to the residents. This is supposed to be a community-driven process, and tonight we're presenting what the community is asking for.
What 1,250 some people of the community are asking for?
That's over 27, or that's over 25%.
That's just a quarter then. That's just a quarter of all the people. Go ahead, Councillor Getz.
I'd just like to point out, I've been part of this process for 7 years now. And as long as I've been part of it, part of the willingness has been that the Indigenous folks of our community would have a say in this. So I'm not 100% sure they're willing to step forward and make their decision on this project prior to the municipal election. Unless you're aware of them making a decision on it, I'm not.
I'm not
So
sure that
I believe they have an equal say. They've had as much say into this as anybody, and I mean, from earlier on, your group was jumping up and down with joy when they turned down the DGR site for the low and intermediate waste. So we had said that they would have a say in this project. We committed to that, and by rushing them, now we're telling them, no, we were just kidding. So I'm not in favor of rescinding this motion. I think we're in a process. It's not a project. And I've told you this several times. So I think until we've checked all the boxes off, there's nothing really to vote upon at this point.
Mark, I would tend to disagree in a sense that we don't know what we're voting on, but we really do. NWMO is proposing to bring all of Canada's waste, high-level nuclear waste, to our municipality and safely store it underground. That's the process that is happening. That's a project, because your Dave Rushton is a project manager. So there has to be a project in motion to be a project manager. According to the latest update, there could be 72,000 tons of nuclear waste with more to come. That's what the community will vote on, whether it wants to host the DGR or not. Why will we wait to see if the NWMO chooses us? We need to stop treating the citizens of South Bruce like we're children, and we do have a say.
Hello. We're going to have a couple of questions for the audience to answer. So we're going to throw up a couple of poll questions right now, and hopefully we'll get some answers and get some interaction going on with questions.
The results of that poll are now up.
And I hope you can all see the results for yourselves. So we'll go on to this.
Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, so at the beginning, it was stated how you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. Just a reminder that they're to reflect the requests for a referendum and not to discuss whether or not to have one, but how to work towards having the municipal election in October 2022 and the referendum to coincide with that. If time doesn't permit for us to get all the questions answered tonight, you will be sent an email with responses. So thanks again for taking the time to join us in this and asking for a referendum. And we'll go to our questions now. If you see on the screen, you can see where it is to raise your hand. Everyone has a chance to have a look at that. So we had one question come in during the video. And I don't know, it was from a South Bruce resident. Would that person like to verbally ask their question? Or would you like it read out loud? If you want to just type it down here in the chat, we can either unmute you so you can ask your question, or we can answer it through the chat, through Bill or Michelle. We'll just take a minute. While we're waiting for a response from the South Bruce resident, we'll go to Marilyn Hay, who is not a resident but has a question. Perhaps if council feels it is too soon for the referendum, could they commit tonight to do the referendum before any final decision is undertaken?
Michelle, you want to answer that?
Sure. I guess the simple answer is council could say that they're not going to make a decision, but they can't commit a future council to a referendum. And the division within our community just continues to grow. And the studies can be completed with the information that we need to make this decision. And the people who signed this petition were asking that council starts to listen to the residents, let the people have a voice so people know what the future holds for the municipality of South Bruce, and they can make their decisions based upon what is coming.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Okay, I'll go ahead and read the South Bruce resident question. It says, I'm curious if the position of POW is that the other 75% haven't demanded a 2022 election. They should be ignored. Should these people who want to wait to learn and get study results be ignored because 25% of the people want to vote sooner? Why rush? Why is waiting such an awful thing? It seems as if our choice only applies to those who are against the project. Just my observations and questions. So Michelle or Bill, maybe we can start with the referendum who are for a referendum, not for or against a project. Who would like to take that one?
Well, we're not, this discussion that we're having is not whether you're for or against the DGR. It's a discussion about whether we want to have a vote to determine whether we're a willing host community. The comment that 75% of the people want to wait is rather an assumption that isn't really valid unless you've tested the 75% of the people that haven't responded to either. There've been actually two surveys done, or two petitions, we want to call them that. And at this point, the only real significant fact is that 25% of the people that were approached and that were willing to say they want a vote on the issue with the election in October 22nd, that's a significant number when you look at the number of people that actually voted in the last election. So I think it's a wrong assumption to assume that 75% of the people want to wait. That's not a valid assumption. So Michelle, do you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to agree with that. And as well, I know when people were talking to people, there's people who told us they would like to have a referendum as part of the October 2022 election, but they were worried about having their name on a petition because they were worried it would affect their place of employment. They were worried that they might lose business. And some people were just concerned that they might make friends or family angry with them. So I know I had several people tell me that they would like to sign, they do want a referendum as soon as possible, but they were worried about putting their name down. So again, to say that because 75% of the people haven't signed the petition means that they don't want a referendum is just a very false assumption.
Yeah, and the question about, you know, why the rush? We've been listening to this program of the NWMO now since 2012. The fact is that most of the information is available that is actually going to be useful. The real, as Michelle and Diane identified during the council meeting, there are all kinds of good reasons why we should do this earlier than later. Nobody is going to, you know, as one council rush the science or haste makes waste. That's not the case. All you have to do is focus your attention on getting one study done, which is a study associated with, is there any economic benefit or any real benefit to the community? And that study is possibly can be done in the next 9 months. And that's the information most people would like to know, whether or not this is worth the benefit versus the risk that might be involved. So why not do it? Why not do it in October is really the question.
Thank you, Bill. We're going to go to a live question now. So if you are able to unmute Yoka Scott, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
We've got you, Yoka. Thank you. Go ahead.
What can we do as individuals to get council to listen to us, since council does not even give people the time of day, any form that we try to engage with them, like letters, they get ignored. Even at the Zoom meetings, they are hiding behind COVID. We can ask questions tonight here. How come we cannot do any of those things to our local council? Is Elections Canada setting the rules on this voting? And when so the question here is, when is the municipality actually setting their own rules, or is Election Canada setting the rules for a referendum? Who is making the rules, whether it will be paper or electronic? So it's a multi question here, actually. What is going to happen if we don't get this council to listen to us? What will be the next step?
Well, first of all, it's the Municipal Act of Ontario that determines when a referendum can be held. So it's not the council that's deciding the timeline associated when things have got to be submitted. So it's the Ontario Municipal Act that determines that. We're going to come back to the call for action, Yoka, and in that we'll probably talk a little bit about what we think you could do as residents of South Bruce to help us all in this fight with our council. So we will come back to that. I answered a couple. Michelle, did I miss a couple that Yoka that you would want to chat about?
I think you covered it all. Did we miss something, Yoka?
Well, it's kind of a multi-question that probably not many people can answer other than council, some of those why questions. But thank you for the answer on the election question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Yoka. We have another question relating to referendum. From David Wood. Is February the 19th still the deadline for this referendum?
Yes.
Yes, February 19th. And actually, it's a little earlier than that, David, because there's got to be an announcement out to the public 10 days in advance of that. So February 8th is February 9th is kind of the drop dead date as far as getting this municipal election and the referendum tied together.
Okay, thank you. Question from Sharon. There are not over 5,600 people who can vote. How many are actual voting ratepayers do we have?
In the 2018 election, it was 4,685, I think. I don't have the paper in front of me, but I think that was the number. And in terms of what the voting list is now, when Diane and I went into the municipal office to look at the list that Mayor Buckle thought we should compare against, we literally just were given a huge binder that just had property roll numbers and the people who owned the property. And then we asked, this doesn't cover residents who rent. And we were told that the municipality doesn't have any kind of voter list. So the closest date we can go by is the information from the 2018 election.
Which they did not have on hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct. Okay. We have a question from Parsons. Do you want that verbalized? Would you like to verbalize that or have it read? I'll let you answer that. We'll go to Sandy's comment about the DGR presentation with the Indigenous people. When Mr. Margetts mentioned that in the presentation that we were doing about the petition, it was off topic and not really related to the referendum. So just make a note of that. Okay, I'll read out the question. Bill and Michelle, if we need to get the results of the studies, should we not have time to gather those results efficiently and effectively to the majority of the voting population, then provide them adequate time to absorb the information and develop an independent opinion? Do you think a couple of months that this can be achieved?
I actually do, because most of the information that we need is actually already gathered. If you actually read through the list of studies in the work statements, several of the studies are actually, they're just gathering previous studies to put together a report. And at the end of the day, the environmental studies, if those come back as a not safe, the DGR can't happen here anyways, even if the community did vote that we were willing. So really the only study that we really need is the financial impact study. And there's no reason why haven't they been working on that already? And why hasn't the NWMO already set forth the things that they've actually are going to do? I find it interesting to listen amongst the community, depending on who you're talking to. We're getting anything from like Tim Hortons, bowling alleys, all the roads and bridges are going to be paved. Yet from the NWMO, we have not seen a single concrete commitment to any financial agreement. So the NWMO needs to stop postponing. They need to sit down and they need to get together that draft agreement so the community knows what the advantages are, and then the community can vote.
Thank you. We have a question, a hand up I see from JXABNTT G749. Would you like to identify yourself, please, before we ask you for your question? While we're waiting for them to identify, let's go to Ann Powell. Megan, if you can unmute her. And we know, Ann, that you're not from the area.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm not from the area, and I made that clear in my introduction, and I also didn't vote in the poll. Up in Renfrew County, we have our own issues with NWMO and the whole way that the nuclear industry functions with consultations and trying to get their way about stuff. I attended the meeting and I thought that I was appalled. But I'm listening to all of this, and some of you may remember that I even questioned way back when whether or not you really wanted to push for a referendum. Now I see that it's a really interesting campaign, and I respect the decisions that you've made. I'm thinking though that if you're not going to get the referendum, in pushing for the referendum, what could be the secondary goal that you actually have? Would it be to, and here's where my question is, would it be to let people know how undemocratic the government is being, the council is being? Would that be it? So it's just a thought. I mean, it seems to me like you're up against a deadline. You're up against a hard wall in the attitudes of the council. So if you're not going to get the referendum, and you're going to keep pushing for the referendum, what's the major goal that you're actually going for? And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Is there any follow-up that you'd like to add, Bill or Michelle?
No, I think it's a good question, and we're going to have to, if we're not successful in getting the council to agree to a referendum in the October timeframe, we'll have to determine what we do next. But right now, our focus is still to try and convince them that this is the right timeline to do it. It's when you're going to get the most people coming out for voting. Last election, we had 46.8 people come out to vote that were eligible. And what we need to make this a binding condition, we need 50% of the people to come out and that are eligible to vote, and 50% of the people to actually say whether they want or not want the project being proposed by the NWMO. So I think we'll continue our focus for now, and that's what this session is all about tonight as well, is to get an understanding of this group. You know, we can't do much without the support of our community and the people that are in this session tonight. So we are looking for guidance on that, and we'll talk more about that in the call to action.
Okay, thank you, Bill. We have a comment or a kind of a inquiry. Do you feel the municipal election will be the referendum?
If we do not get commitment from our council to have a referendum as part of the municipal election, that's what's going to happen. That will be the main central issue, overriding all other things as our municipal election.
Okay, thank you. Are there, I lost my JX person. Sorry, I can't find you on the screen to answer your question now. If you're there, just mention in the chat, please. Okay. I think we've covered all the questions that have been put forward as questions. There's one here just kind of popped up. Okay, I think that can conclude our question and answers. If you come up with another question or such, please just put it in the chat and we'll try to answer it and send it out in an email for you. Thank you to all those that participated and had comments and questions.
All right, so now we're at the take action part. We are up against a well-financed organization with many employees whose full-time job is to manufacture willingness within our community. So what do we do now? We work together to have our voices heard. To quote Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. But we're not a small group. Over 25% of eligible voters signed the petition requesting an October referendum. Over 25% signed, and others told us that they wanted to sign, but they were worried it might upset their employer, they could lose some business, or they might anger their family and friends. Let's raise our voices together in a choir that can't be ignored. Contact the councillors, the mayor, the CAO by phone and email. Write letters to the newspapers. Reach out to family and friends and see if they've signed and handed in their cards. Contact MP Ben Lobb and MPP Lisa Thompson. And save the date for the February 8th council meeting. In the poll, we saw that over 84% are wanting to present the petition in the agenda as part of that meeting. That'll be the last available meeting before the deadline to hold a referendum. We have sent a delegation request into council already earlier this week. We are still waiting to hear back from them, but save that date and we will keep you informed on details to follow. Now we have a couple other poll questions. What are you willing to do to help? And how would you like to be informed and contacted?
Okay, the results of that poll are now up.
Michelle, you want to add anything as a result of seeing the poll questions?
Nope, it's just that, like, I don't know if that picture, I just find it really an encouraging picture because together we can accomplish great things, but it takes all of us working together. One person singing quietly in the wind isn't going to be heard. We need everybody to stand up together and present a united front. And we just thank everybody for listening this evening. And I think Bill is going to close the evening off.
Yes, well, I again want to thank everybody for attending. We hope you got something out of the meeting. And we also hope that you all will take some action. The deadline, as I mentioned earlier, for getting the council to change their mind is on their council meeting on February 8th. And the deadline is for getting it, the referendum with the meeting or with the election in October 2020 this year. We need to have our municipal staff write out a letter to the residents of the community on February 9th. So that's kind of our next phase of activity. And we'll look forward to hearing from you all and also let us know if there's anything that you want to know. There was one comment in the chat that I found kind of interesting, and that was, it sounded like Michelle and Bill were all rehearsed and that somebody paid them big bucks to get them prepped for this meeting. I can tell you, nobody paid me anything, and nor Michelle. So this is the two of us just trying to make sense of what's going on and to provide you what we believe, and that's all we can do. So thanks again for attending, and to let us know if this was useful for the group that did attend. So send us emails or contact us by phone, any way at all. So again, thanks, and that's it for tonight.